Picture a world where castles whispered secrets louder than any modern gossip could shout. In the heart of the medieval age, queens didn't just wear crowns. They wielded power, broke hearts, and sparked scandals that echoed through time. Tonight, as you settle into the quiet of your evening, let's unravel their stories. Tales so wild they'd make even the boldest bards blush. These women didn't follow the rules. They wrote their own, with ink dipped in courage and defiance. From shadowy courts to candlelit feasts, their lives were a tapestry of intrigue, woven with threads of ambition, love, and betrayal. Imagine a queen slipping a secret beneath her throne, or another turning a festival into a rebellion. These are the stories we'll wander through, each one a window into a world where every whisper held the weight of an empire. Close your eyes for a moment and see yourself by a crackling hearth, the glow of firelight dancing on stone walls. The night is still, but the air hums with anticipation, as if history itself is leaning in to share its tales. We're not here to lecture or bore you with dusty facts. No, we're here to step into the lives of women who ruled, loved, and dared in ways that still captivate us centuries later. From the icy peaks of Naples to the raucous halls of ancient Rome, we'll follow their footsteps, feel their triumphs, and unravel their mysteries. This isn't just history, it's a journey, one that pulls you in like a fireside tale told under a starlit sky. As we begin, let's weave a thread that ties these queens to the festive chaos of medieval winters and the quiet strength of those who brought life into the world. Their stories aren't just about crowns or courts, they're about the human heart beating against the weight of tradition. You might be curled up in a blanket, the world outside fading as the night deepens, but these tales will keep you company, each one a spark that lights up the dark. From a queen who danced with danger to a midwife who held life in her hands, we'll explore a world where every choice could rewrite history. So, dim the lights, let the modern world slip away, and step into a time when power was a game of wit and will. Our first stop is Naples, where a young queen named Joanna took the throne in 1343. She wasn't just a ruler, she was a storm, bold and unapologetic, rewriting the rules of royalty with every step. Her court wasn't a stage for quiet obedience, it was a theater of drama, where love, betrayal, and whispers of murder played out under golden chandeliers. Ready to meet her? Let's cross the centuries and step into her world, where every choice was a gamble and every gamble changed the game. In 1343, the sun rose over Naples, casting golden rays on a young woman who was about to turn a coronation into a rebellion. Joanna, barely 20, stepped into the throne room with a glint in her eye that said she wasn't here to play by the dusty rules of royalty. Tradition? To her, it was a suggestion, not a command. The bishops and nobles expected a demure queen, but Joanna had other plans. She wore her crown like a dare, her every gesture a challenge to the old ways. The court buzzed with whispers as she took her oath, not as a puppet of custom, but as a queen who'd rewrite the story of Naples with her own pen. Her reign began not with a bow, but with a flourish, as if she knew the world was watching. Joanna's life was a whirlwind of marriages, each one a chapter in a saga that left tongues wagging across Europe. First came Andrew of Hungary, a prince who seemed more like a pawn in her game. Their marriage was a diplomatic dance, but it ended in shadows. One night, Andrew met a grim fate, found dangling from a window, his life snuffed out. The official word was an accident, but the court's whispers told a darker tale. Had Joanna orchestrated it? No one dared say it aloud, but the suspicion clung to her like perfume. She outlived him, just as she would outlive others. Husbands came and went, but Joanna remained, her heart a fortress no man could fully claim. Each marriage was a gamble, and she played with the confidence of a card sharp in a tavern. Then there was the legend of the trapdoor, a story so wild it could only belong to Joanna. They said her bed concealed a secret passage, a hidden chute, where lovers who lingered too long vanished into the night. Was it true? Perhaps not, but it fit her like a velvet glove. Joanna was a riddle, equal parts charm and danger, her smile as sharp as a blade. She ruled with a charisma that could hush a room or spark a war. Rivals circled like wolves, and wars loomed on Naples's borders, but she navigated them with the poise of a dancer on a tightrope. Her court was a stage, and she was its star, delivering lines that kept allies dazzled and enemies guessing. Every decision was a performance, every alliance a carefully scripted scene. But even queens like Joanna couldn't outrun fate. In 1382, her story ended in a way that matched its drama. Strangled in a castle, her breath stolen by those who feared her power. Her death was no quiet fade. It was a final act that sealed her legend. She left behind a Naples forever changed, a kingdom where her name still sparked tales of audacity and intrigue. Gossip swirled long after her crown was laid down, painting her as both villain and visionary. As the firelight of history flickers, Joanna's shadow looms large, a queen who lived boldly and loved fiercely, defying anyone who dared to cage her spirit. Now, let's travel north to a woman who didn't just bend the rules, she shattered them into 1,000 glittering pieces. Eleanor of Aquitaine was waiting, her own saga ready to unfold. Step into the 12th century, where one woman didn't just walk through history, she carved her name into it with a flourish. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a force of nature, a queen who wore power like a second skin, first of France, then of England, and mother to kings who'd shaped the world. Born into wealth and wit, she was a blaze of energy in a world of rigid rules, her laughter echoing through courts that tried and failed to tame her. At 15, she was already a duchess, her lands stretching across the sunlit fields of Aquitaine, her mind sharper than any sword. Eleanor didn't just live. She owned her century, turning every room she entered into a stage where she was the undeniable star. Her first marriage, to Louis VI of France, was less a love story and more a clash of opposites. Louis was pious, his days filled with prayers and parchment, his heart tethered to the church. Eleanor, she was a whirlwind of charm and ambition, her spirit too bright for the dim halls of Paris. Married at 15, she found his devotion about as thrilling as a monk's ledger, her vibrant energy stifled by his solemn ways. The court watched as she chafed against his restraint, her wit outshining his every decree. Their union was a tapestry of mismatched threads, and Eleanor wasn't one to sit quietly while the world passed her by. She wanted more life, more fire, more power. Then came the Second Crusade, a journey that should have been a holy quest, but turned into Eleanor's grand adventure. She rode out with Louis, her retinue a spectacle of silks and banners, as if the desert itself was her audience. Rumors swirled like sandstorms, whispers of flirtations with knights, perhaps even her own uncle, as she navigated the sun-scorched paths. The crusade was no solemn pilgrimage for Eleanor. It was a chance to steal the spotlight, her charisma outshining the dust and danger. She didn't just follow the army, she led its spirit, her presence a spark that lit up the camps. The church grumbled, and Louis frowned. But Eleanor? She thrived, her laughter a defiance of the crusade's grim purpose. The marriage couldn't last. Eleanor, ever the strategist, secured a divorce from Louis, a rare feat in a world bound by sacred vows. No sooner had the ink dried than she turned her gaze to Henry Plantagenet, a fiery young duke with ambition to match her own. Their union was no quiet affair. It was a spark that would ignite a dynasty. Together, they were a storm, their partnership as passionate as it was turbulent, a dance of power and pride that would reshape England. As the candles burned low in their courts, Eleanor's story was just beginning, her next chapter waiting in the romantic, rebellious halls of Poitiers. Let's follow her there, to a court where love and defiance wove a new kind of legend, one that only Eleanor could write. In the golden haze of Poitiers, Eleanor of Aquitaine crafted a world where love was both a poem and a rebellion. Her court wasn't just a castle, it was a living tapestry woven with music, whispered verses, and the electric hum of forbidden glances. Here, in the 1170s, she transformed stone halls into a stage where knights and ladies played out dreams of courtly love. Eleanor, now in her prime, was no mere queen. She was a muse, her presence a melody that inspired poets to sing of devotion and desire. The air was thick with the scent of roses and ink, as troubadours spun tales of knights kneeling before their ladies, hearts pledged in vows that shimmered like candlelight. Yet beneath the romance, there was a pulse of defiance. Eleanor's court was a place where rules bent, and hearts dared to break them. Courtly love, Eleanor's grand creation, was a dance of longing, where knights swore loyalty to ladies they could never touch. It was noble in theory, odes to unattainable beauty, chaste promises sealed with a bow. But in Poitiers, those boundaries blurred. Behind tapestries, stolen kisses sparked rumors that flew faster than arrows. A lady's smile could launch a duel, a knight's poem could hide a lover's intent. Eleanor reveled in it, her laughter a spark that lit the court ablaze. She wasn't just a patron of poets. She was the architect of a world where passion was power, and every verse was a subtle rebellion against the church's stern gaze. Her court was a sanctuary for dreamers, but also a stage for those bold enough to cross lines drawn by tradition. Yet, Eleanor's heart wasn't only in poetry, it was in power. When her husband Henry strayed, favoring his allies over their shared throne, she didn't weep or wait. Instead, she turned her fire on him, rallying her sons to rise in revolt. In 1173, she backed their rebellion, a mother lioness defending her cubs and her legacy. It was a gamble that shook England's foundations, but Henry struck back, capturing her and locking her in a castle for 16 long years. Confined, Eleanor didn't fade. Her spirit burned brighter, her mind weaving plans and letters from behind stone walls. She wrote, she schemed, she endured, proving that even in chains, a queen could shape history. Her resilience was a quiet storm, her every word a testament to a will that refused to bow. As the years passed, Eleanor's legend grew, her time in Poitiers a beacon for those who dared to love and defy. She was no prisoner of fate, she was its author, crafting a legacy that outlasted her chains. Her story, like her court, was a blend of enchantment and rebellion, a tale that lingered in the hearts of those who heard it. But across the sea, another queen was stirring, her own scandal born not of ambition, but of boredom. Margaret of Burgundy, trapped in a gilded cage, was about to set her own court ablaze with whispers that would echo through time. In the glittering courts of early 14th century France, Margaret of Burgundy wore the crown of a perfect queen, her grace and beauty the envy of all. Married to Louis, the future king, she was expected to embody virtue, a shining star in a realm of duty. But Louis was no match for her spark. His dour presence was as thrilling as a rain-soaked afternoon. Trapped in a marriage that felt more like a cage, Margaret's heart wandered, seeking something to stir her restless spirit. The court saw her smile, but beneath it simmered a boredom that would soon ignite a scandal so shocking it would ripple through history, whispered in hushed tones by firelight. By the Seine, in the shadow of the Tour de Nesle, Margaret found her escape. This looming tower, its stones cold and silent, became her stage for forbidden nights. Alongside her sister-in-law Blanche, she met two dashing knights, their laughter echoing where propriety should have reigned. The tower's walls hid their secrets, stolen moments, whispered promises, and the thrill of defiance. They thought their rendezvous were cloaked in darkness, safe from prying eyes. But secrets, like embers, have a way of catching fire. The court buzzed with suspicion, and soon a detail so absurd it could only be fate unraveled their game. Matching pillowcases, gifted by the sisters to their lovers, were spotted by a watchful eye. Medieval laundry, it seems, was the ultimate betrayer. The discovery struck like a thunderbolt. King Philip, Louis's father, was not a man to forgive. The knights, once bold, faced a gruesome end, tortured and executed, their fates a warning carved in blood. Margaret's crown offered no shield. Stripped of her title, she was dragged from the glittering court to the grim towers of Chateau Gaillard, a fortress as cold as her husband's heart. There, in damp solitude, she languished, her beauty fading against stone walls. Whispers spoke of her death in 1315, shrouded in mystery. Some said illness, others hinted at darker hands. Was it despair or something more sinister? The truth slipped away, leaving only the echo of her name, a queen undone by her own daring. Margaret's tale was no mere scandal. It was a lesson in the cost of crossing lines in a world bound by iron rules. Her tower, once a haven, became a symbol of betrayal, its shadow long enough to touch the courts of Europe. As her story faded into legend, another queen was rising, her own heart bruised by a husband's neglect. Isabella of France, far across the sea, was about to turn her frustration into a fire that would burn brighter than any scandal, leading not to a tower, but to an invasion that would shake a kingdom to its core. In the shadowed halls of 14th century England, Isabella of France stood as a queen whose radiance was dimmed by a husband who barely saw her. Married to Edward II, she was meant to be the heart of the court, but Edward's eyes were fixed on his favorites. First Piers Gaveston, a swaggering knight whose charm outshone the crown, and later Hugh Despenser, a man whose ambition was as sharp as a blade. Isabella, with her wit and fire, was relegated to the margins, her presence an afterthought in a court dazzled by Edward's chosen companions. At their coronation in 1308, the insult was public. Gaveston, draped in royal silks, stole the spotlight, leaving Isabella to swallow her pride as whispers of her husband's neglect filled the air. Each slight was a spark, and her heart, once patient, began to smolder with resentment. The years wore on, and Isabella's frustration grew into a quiet storm. Hugh Despenser's rise was the final blow. His sneers and schemes pushed her beyond endurance. She was no damsel to weep in silence. She was a queen with a will of iron. In 1325, she sailed to France under the guise of diplomacy, her mind already weaving a plan. There, in the courts of her homeland, she met Roger Mortimer, a disgraced noble whose hunger for vengeance matched her own. Their alliance was more than political. It was a fire kindled in exile, fueled by shared ambition and whispered promises. Together, they plotted a return that would shake England's foundations, a rebellion born not of whim, but of a queen's unyielding resolve. In 1326, Isabella landed on England's shores, not as a scorned wife, but as a conqueror. With Mortimer at her side and an army at her back, she swept through the land like a tempest, her teenage son Edward in tow, ready to claim his future. The nobles, weary of Edward II's misrule, flocked to her banner. Towns opened their gates, and Despenser's power crumbled like ash. Edward II was captured, his reign unraveling as swiftly as it had frayed Isabella's patience. In 1327, he was deposed, his crown passed to his son, Edward III. Whispers spoke of Edward's death soon after, a shadowy end in a castle cell. Some said by Isabella's command, others by fate's cruel hand. The truth was buried, but Isabella's triumph was clear. For a time, she ruled as regent, her son's throne under her steady hand. With Mortimer, she governed with a boldness that silenced her doubters, proving she was no mere ornament but a force to rival any king. Yet, her victory was fleeting. Her son would soon claim his own power, and Mortimer's star would fall. Isabella's name, though, endured, a tale of a queen who turned betrayal into conquest. As her story faded into the night, another queen's whispers began to stir. Across the sea, Agnes of Navarre wove her own subtle scandals, her secrets dancing through the courts of Aragon. In the sun-drenched courts of Aragon, where the air carried the scent of orange blossoms, Agnes of Navarre glided like a shadow cast by candlelight. Married to James IV, a king whose mood swung like a pendulum, she was a queen of culture and grace, her wit as sharp as the verses she inspired. James was a storm of instability, his temper a wildfire that scorched those around him, but Agnes was no wilting flower. She moved through his chaos with a quiet allure, her eyes holding secrets that poets tried to capture in their songs. Her court was a gallery of art and whispers, where every glance she gave seemed to weave a new tale, each one more tantalizing than the last. Rumors clung to Agnes like silk, soft but impossible to ignore. They spoke of knights who lingered too long in her presence, their hearts ensnared by her charm. Courtiers, drawn to her like moths to a flame, found their names tangled in gossip. Some even whispered of a monk, his vows forgotten under her spell. Were these truths or merely the court's fevered imagination? Agnes never confirmed nor denied, her smile a riddle that invited speculation. She spoke the language of flirtation with a fluency that rivaled the finest Latin scholars, her every word a brushstroke on a canvas of intrigue. The ballads sang of her beauty, but they hinted at something darker, a queen whose heart was a labyrinth no one fully mapped. Then there were the shadows that trailed her. A courtier vanished without a trace, a maid found drowned in a quiet stream. Accidents, they said, but the whispers grew louder. Was Agnes a mere bystander to these tragedies, or did her delicate hands pull unseen strings? No proof ever surfaced, yet the questions lingered, heavy as the incense in Aragon's chapels. She moved through these mysteries untouched, her composure a mask that neither confirmed nor dispelled the tales. Her court was a dance of light and shadow, where every step she took seemed to blur the line between innocence and intrigue, leaving those around her to wonder what truths hid behind her serene gaze. As years passed, Agnes chose a different path. She stepped away from the court's gilded chaos, retreating to a convent's quiet walls. There, the ballad said, she traded whispers for prayers, her once vibrant presence cloaked in silence. But even in solitude, her legend refused to fade. Poets still sang of her, their verses weaving a legacy of allure and ambiguity that outlived her time in Aragon. Was she a seductress, a schemer, or simply a queen misunderstood? The answer slipped away, as elusive as Agnes herself. Now let's turn to another queen, one whose heart burned not with subtle whispers, but with an obsession that consumed her. Joanna of Castile, across the sea, was about to let love write a story that would echo through the ages. In the golden courts of 16th century Spain, Joanna of Castile burned with a love that could light up the stars or consume them. Her heart belonged to Philip the Handsome, a prince whose charm was as dazzling as it was treacherous. From the moment they met, Joanna was captivated, her world narrowing to the curve of his smile, the spark in his eyes. She was no ordinary queen. She was the daughter of Spain's greatest monarchs, yet Philip was her son, her every breath tied to his presence. But Philip's heart wandered, his affections scattered like petals in the wind. His affairs were no secret, each one a dagger to Joanna's soul, and her love, so fierce and unshakable, began to twist into something darker, a fire that threatened to burn all it touched. Joanna's rage was a tempest. She didn't weep in silence like a proper queen. She confronted Philip with a passion that shook the court. Her voice, sharp with betrayal, echoed through marble halls as she demanded fidelity he couldn't give. Servants whispered of her outbursts, her eyes blazing as she faced the women who dared share his bed. The court watched, half in awe, half in fear, as her love turned into a battle, each confrontation a clash of heart and pride. She was a queen, yet her devotion made her human, her pain laid bare for all to see. The more Philip strayed, the tighter she clung, her love a chain that bound her to both joy and torment. Then, in 1506, fate struck a cruel blow. Philip died suddenly, his life snuffed out like a candle in a storm. Joanna's world shattered. She didn't mourn in quiet chapels. She refused to let him go. In a macabre pilgrimage, she carried his coffin across Castile, her grief a public spectacle. By day, she rode beside the hearse, her eyes fixed on the wooden shell that held her love. By night, she slept near it, as if death could be persuaded by her devotion. Whispers spread. Some called her mad. Others saw a queen broken by a heart too full. The roads of Spain bore witness to her sorrow, each step a testament to a love that defied reason. A queen who carried her pain like a crown. Her family, fearing her unraveling, confined her to a convent in Tordesillas. There, behind stone walls, Joanna lived out her days, her world reduced to memories of Philip. Was she mad, as the court claimed, her mind lost to obsession? Or was she simply a woman whose love burned too brightly for a world that demanded restraint? The truth blurred, like ink on a tear-stained page. Her confinement silenced her voice, but not her story, which lingered in the air like a half-forgotten song. As Joanna's tale faded into shadow, another queen star was rising, one whose scandals would outshine even the darkest legends. Catherine the Great, far from the medieval courts, was about to weave a saga of power and passion that would dazzle the world. Across the vast snows of 18th century Russia, a woman rose to power who didn't just rule, she redefined what it meant to wear a crown. Catherine the Great, a German princess turned empress, wasn't a medieval queen, but her scandals burned so brightly they demand a place in our tale. She arrived in Russia as Sophie, a young bride wed to Peter III, a man whose childish whims were better suited to toy soldiers than a throne. Peter was a storm of immaturity, his court a playground for his tantrums. Catherine, sharp as a winter wind, saw through him from the start. She didn't sulk in his shadow. She began plotting her own empire, her mind a chessboard where every move was calculated for victory. Catherine's marriage was less a romance and more a battlefield. Peter's neglect left her free to forge alliances, not with diplomats, but with lovers chosen for their strength and cunning. Men like Grigory Orlov and Grigory Potemkin weren't just paramours. They were partners in her rise, each one a piece in her grand strategy. Her affairs weren't reckless. They were deliberate, a queen's way of building loyalty and power in a court that underestimated her. Whispers of her charm filled St. Petersburg's halls, but so did lies. The most infamous? A sordid tale about a horse, a cruel fabrication spun by enemies who couldn't fathom a woman outwitting them. It was slander, nothing more, a desperate attempt to dim the light of a queen who shone too brightly. Catherine didn't just rule, she reshaped Russia. She seized the throne in 1762, ousting Peter with a coup as swift as it was bloodless. Her reign was a tapestry of reform. She expanded education, modernized laws, and stretched Russia's borders. Her court buzzed with intellectuals, her letters to Voltaire a testament to her wit. She was no mere monarch. She was a force, steering an empire through storms with a steady hand. Her lovers, her policies, her very presence were a defiance of what a woman could be. She ruled not as a queen, but as an architect of history, her every decision a brushstroke on a canvas that stretched across continents. Her end came suddenly in 1796, a stroke felling her in the midst of her work. But death couldn't erase her legend. Catherine's name became a beacon, a story of a woman who turned gossip into glory, scandal into strength. She didn't just ride history, she shaped it, her legacy a fire that warmed Russia long after her passing. As her star faded, another queen's shadow loomed, one whose ruthlessness would carve a different kind of tale. Fredegund of Neustria, in the wilds of 6th century Francia, was about to redefine scandal with a blade and a whisper. In the raw, untamed heart of 6th century Francia, where power was won with blood and whispers, Fredegund emerged from the shadows. She began as a servant, her eyes sharp with ambition, her heart a furnace of cunning. No one expected a woman of low birth to claim a crown, but Fredegund didn't climb to the throne. She carved her path through it, each step marked by a calculated charm that could sway kings and silence rivals. Married to King Chilperic, she rose from the ashes of obscurity, her beauty a weapon, her mind a blade. The court of Neustria watched in uneasy awe as she reshaped their world, her every smile a promise of danger, her every move a step toward dominion. Chilperic's previous wives didn't fare well in Fredegund's shadow. First came Audovera, cast aside, then Galswintha, whose marriage ended in a noose under mysterious circumstances. The court whispered of poison, of quiet orders given in the dead of night. Fredegund's hands were never stained, but her presence loomed over each convenient death. She didn't just replace these women, she erased them, her ascent to queen a trail of questions no one dared ask aloud. Her love for Chilperic was fierce, but it was her ambition that burned brighter, turning a servant's rags into a queen's robes with a ruthlessness that left the court breathless. Her greatest rival was Brunhilde, her sister-in-law, a queen of equal fire in neighboring Austrasia. Their feud was no petty squabble. It was a war of wills, fought with assassins' blades and whispered plots. Fredegund sent killers to silence Brunhilde's allies, her schemes as intricate as a spider's web. Brunhilde struck back, and the land trembled with their vendetta, kingdoms caught in the crossfire of their hatred. Fredegund's ferocity was unmatched. She wielded power like a dagger, her every move a strike against those who dared oppose her. The court learned quickly, cross Fredegund, and you might not see the dawn. Her enemies fell, one by one, their fates a warning etched in the stones of Neustria. Yet, in a twist that felt like history's own jest, Fredegund's end was quiet. In 597, she died in her bed, her heart stilled not by a blade but by time. For a queen who lived with a knife's edge in her hand, it was an irony that echoed through the ages. Her life had been a storm of blood and ambition, yet she slipped away in peace, leaving a legacy of awe and fear. Fredegund was no mere queen. She was a tempest, her name a whisper that haunted Francia long after her final breath. As her shadow faded, another woman's ambition was rising across the sea. Anne Boleyn, in the glittering courts of England, was about to reshape a kingdom with a wit and will that would rival even Fredegund's ferocity. In the bustling courts of 16th century England, Anne Boleyn arrived like a spark in a powder keg, her wit and style igniting a fire that would reshape a kingdom. She wasn't just another lady at court. She was a vision, her dark eyes and sharp tongue weaving a spell that captivated King Henry VIII. Where others simpered, Anne dazzled, her laughter a melody that drowned out the murmurs of tradition. She moved through the halls with a grace that turned heads, her every word a challenge to the world that underestimated her. Henry, a king used to getting his way, found himself ensnared, his heart not just caught, but held hostage by a woman who knew her worth and demanded the world know it too. Anne wasn't content to be a fleeting mistress, a shadow in the king's bedchamber. She wanted more, a crown, a legacy, a place in history. When Henry offered love, she offered a bargain, marriage or nothing. Her refusal was a gambit that shook England to its core. To win her, Henry defied the Pope, broke with Rome, and forged the Church of England, a seismic shift that echoed through cathedrals and courts. In 1533, Anne took her place as queen, her coronation a triumph of ambition over convention. She wasn't just a consort, she was a force, her presence a whirlwind that reshaped the kingdom's soul. As queen, Anne's sharp tongue was both her crown and her curse. She ruled with a charisma that dazzled, her words cutting through the stuffy air of court like a blade. But the pressure to produce a male heir weighed heavy. Her daughter, Elizabeth, was a treasure, but not the son Henry craved. Whispers turned to accusations, adultery, treason, even witchcraft, charges as flimsy as the silk she wore. The court, once her stage, became her cage. In 1536, her trial was a mockery, a scripted tragedy designed to erase her. Anne faced the scaffold with a queen's dignity, her final words calm, her spirit unbroken. The blade fell, and her light was snuffed out, but not her legacy. Anne's story ended in sorrow, but her daughter, Elizabeth, would rise to become one of England's greatest queens, proof that Anne's ambition burned brighter than her enemies' lies. Her life was a comet, brief, blazing, unforgettable, leaving a trail that lit the path for a new era. As her name lingered in England's memory, another woman was stepping into the spotlight. Christina of Denmark, young and clever, was about to face Henry's desires with a wit sharp enough to dodge a king's advances and carve her own place in history's tale. In the shadow of Anne Boleyn's tragic end, a young widow named Christina of Denmark stepped into the glare of Henry VIII's restless gaze. It was 1537, and England's king, his throne still warm from upheaval, was hunting for a new queen. Christina, barely 20, was a prize. Beautiful, poised, and heir to a web of royal bloodlines stretching from Denmark to the Holy Roman Empire. Her husband, the Duke of Milan, had died, leaving her free but vulnerable to the whims of powerful men. Henry, with his towering ego and blood-stained crown, saw her as the next piece in his dynastic puzzle. But Christina wasn't a pawn to be claimed. She was a master of her own game, her wit as sharp as the winter winds of her northern homeland. Henry's envoys arrived, bearing gifts and promises, but Christina met their flattery with a smile that hid a steel resolve. She knew his history, wives discarded, beheaded, or cast aside, and she wasn't about to step into that gilded trap. When pressed about marriage, she delivered a quip that echoed through courts like a well-aimed arrow. "If I had 2 heads, I'd gladly give one to King Henry." The words were playful, but their edge was unmistakable, a verbal dagger that left ambassadors speechless and Henry's pride bruised. The court gasped, then grinned. Christina had turned a king's desire into a jest, and history itself seemed to applaud her audacity. Rather than risk her head, Christina chose a safer path. She married Francis, Duke of Lorraine, a man whose quiet strength suited her better than Henry's tempestuous court. Their union was no grand saga, but it gave her stability, a family, and a chance to shine beyond the shadow of a crown. Years later, as regent of Lorraine, she ruled with a wisdom that belied her youth, guiding her duchy through turbulent times with a steady hand. Her decisions were measured, her leadership a testament to a mind that thrived without the weight of a throne. She wasn't just a widow who dodged a king. She was a woman who carved her own legacy, proving that power could be wielded without a scepter. Christina's story wasn't one of battles or betrayals, but of a triumph won through refusal. By saying no to Henry, she claimed a victory sweeter than any crown, her wit outlasting the king who thought he could have her. Her name became a whisper of defiance, a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength lies in walking away. As her tale faded into the soft glow of history, another queen's story was brewing, one steeped in a mother's love gone dark. Maria of Portugal, far from Christina's clever dance, was about to let devotion twist into a shadow that would haunt her legacy. In the sunlit courts of 14th century Castile, Maria of Portugal wore her crown with a quiet grace, but her heart was a storm of unspoken pain. Married to King Alfonso V, she was meant to be the queen of his world, yet his eyes lingered on Leonor, a mistress whose presence cast a shadow over Maria's throne. Leonor's laughter filled the halls, her influence a constant wound to Maria's pride. Outwardly, Maria remained composed, her dignity a shield against the court's pitying glances. But within, her heart turned inward, finding solace not in her husband's fleeting affection, but in her son, Peter. To Maria, Peter was more than an heir. He was her anchor, her reason, her everything. A bond so intense it set whispers drifting through the palace like autumn leaves. Peter grew under Maria's watchful gaze, her love a fierce flame that warmed and sometimes scorched. The court noticed, their murmurs growing louder as her devotion bordered on obsession. She was no distant queen mother. She hovered, her every word and touch shaping Peter's path. When he fell in love with Inez de Castro, a beautiful noblewoman, the court hoped for joy. But Maria's heart tightened. Inez, with her radiant charm, was a threat, not just to her influence but to the sacred bond she held with her son. The whispers grew darker. Maria's love wasn't just maternal. It was a chain, binding Peter to her will. The court watched, uneasy, as her gaze turned sharp, her once gentle presence now edged with something unsettling. Then tragedy struck, cloaked in mystery. In 1355, Inez was murdered, her life cut short by assassins in the quiet of a Coimbra night. The court reeled, and fingers pointed to Maria. Had she whispered the order? Her jealousy a spark that ignited the blades? No proof pinned the crime to her, but the suspicion clung like damp mist. Maria's silence neither confirmed nor denied the rumors, her face a mask of grief or guilt, or perhaps both. The death of Inez shattered Peter, and Maria's bond with him frayed, her love now a weight he could no longer bear. The court, once her stage, became a mirror reflecting her unraveling. Haunted by whispers, her own and the court's, Maria withdrew, fading from the bright halls of Castile. She retreated to a life of shadows, her days spent in quiet corners, her thoughts a tangle of devotion and regret. History watched as she slipped away, her name a cautionary tale of love twisted into something dark. Was she a mother protecting her son, or a queen consumed by her own heart? The answer dissolved into the silence she left behind. As Maria's story dimmed, another queen's fire was rising. Olga of Kiev, far in the east, was about to unleash a vengeance so legendary it would burn through the ages, her wrath a blaze that no court could contain. In the wild frost-bitten lands of 10th century Kiev, Olga stood as a widow forged in grief and fire. Her husband, Igor, Prince of the Rus, had been a ruler of iron will, but the Drevlians, a rebellious tribe, saw him as prey. They ambushed him, tearing him apart in a brutal betrayal that left Olga alone, her heart a smoldering ruin. The Drevlians, drunk on their victory, sent envoys to her court, offering peace and a marriage proposal to their prince. Olga, her face a mask of calm, welcomed them with a smile that hid a storm. She wasn't just a widow, she was a force, and her vengeance would carve her name into history's bones. The Drevlians' envoys arrived, expecting submission. Olga invited them to a bathhouse, a gesture of hospitality, but as they relaxed, she sealed the doors and buried them alive, their screams swallowed by the earth. The court gasped, but Olga was only beginning. The Drevlians, undeterred, sent another group, suitors this time, dreaming of her hand. She locked them in a hall and set it ablaze, their ambitions reduced to ash. Her vengeance was a performance, each act more audacious than the last. When the Drevlians invited her to a feast, thinking to appease her, she turned their celebration into a slaughter. Her men cut through thousands, the banquet a graveyard under her cold gaze. The Drevlians learned too late. Olga's grief was a weapon, and she wielded it with ruthless precision. Her final act was a masterpiece of destruction. The Drevlian capital, Iskorostan, stood defiant, so Olga devised a plan as cunning as it was cruel. She demanded a tribute of birds, pigeons and sparrows from every household, a seemingly harmless request. The city complied, unaware of her intent. As night fell, Olga's men tied burning embers to the birds' tails and set them free. The flock returned to their nests, and the city erupted in flames, a sea of fire that consumed homes, walls, and hope. Iskorostan burned, its people fleeing or perishing in the inferno. Olga watched, her vengeance complete, a queen who turned grief into a blaze that lit the skies. Yet history loves a twist. Olga, the arsonist of vengeance, later embraced Christianity, her heart turning from wrath to faith. She spread the new religion among the Rus, her legacy shifting from destruction to devotion. By the time she died, the church called her a saint, an irony as sharp as her blade. From a widow who burned cities to a holy figure, Olga was a paradox, her story a flame that never dimmed. Her name lingered, a whisper of awe and fear across the ages. As Olga's fire faded into legend, another woman's name was rising, steeped in whispers of a different kind. Lucrezia Borgia, in the treacherous courts of Renaissance Italy, was about to become a symbol of scandal, her life a maze of rumor and intrigue. In the gilded haze of Renaissance Italy, Lucrezia Borgia glided through courts where every smile hid a scheme. Born in 1480, she was the daughter of Pope Alexander VI, a man whose ambition cast shadows longer than his prayers. The Borgia name was a crown and a curse, synonymous with power and scandal. Lucrezia, with her golden hair and enigmatic eyes, was no mere pawn in her father's games. She was a prize, married off to seal alliances, her life a chessboard of politics and whispers. From Rome to Ferrara, she moved through a world where loyalty was fleeting, and every banquet held the scent of danger. The rumors about Lucrezia were as intoxicating as they were vicious. They spoke of poison slipped into goblets, her delicate hands wielding toxins with a sorceress's skill. Whispers grew darker. Tales of forbidden love with her brother Cesare, or even her father, swirled like smoke through Italy's courts. Men who crossed the Borgias vanished, their deaths pinned to Lucrezia's name. Was she a femme fatale, her beauty a trap for the unwary? Or was she a puppet, her reputation twisted by enemies who feared her family's grip? The truth was a shadow, elusive as the moonlight that lit her path. Each accusation added to her legend, painting her as a siren whose every glance was laced with peril. Yet Lucrezia was more than the scandals that clung to her. In Ferrara, as Duchess, she stepped out of her father's shadow, crafting a court of art and intellect. She patronized poets, hosted musicians, and wove a sanctuary of culture amidst the chaos of her past. Her laughter filled halls where once only whispers reigned, her grace softening the edges of her infamous name. She bore children, ruled with quiet strength, and distanced herself from the venom of Rome. But the Borgia legacy was a chain. She could never fully escape the tales of poison and betrayal, no matter how many sonnets she inspired. When she died in 1519, still young, Lucretia left behind a paradox. Was she the villain of Renaissance gossip, a poisoner with a smile? Or a victim, her name stained by a world that feared powerful women? Her story lingers, a blend of glamour and infamy, as captivating now as it was then. In Ferrara's quiet gardens, she found peace, but history remembers her as a storm, her legacy a question that refuses an answer. Far from Italy's intrigue, another woman was rising, her ambition cutting through a different empire. Wu Zetian, in the ancient courts of China, was about to claim a throne no woman had dared touch, her story one of power forged in fire and cunning. In the ancient courts of 7th century China, where silk robes whispered secrets and every glance held a strategy, Wu Zetian began as a mere concubine, a flicker in the vast Tang dynasty. Born with a mind sharper than jade, she was no ordinary woman. Her beauty caught the eye of Emperor Taizong, but it was her cunning that carved her path. When Taizong died, she should have faded into a monastery, as custom demanded. Instead, Wu wove herself into the heart of his son, Gaozong, her charm a thread that pulled her from obscurity to the edge of power. She didn't just climb the palace hierarchy, she dismantled it, step by calculated step, her ambition a flame that burned through tradition. Wu's rise was not gentle. Rivals like Empress Wang and Consort Xiao stood in her way, their influence a barrier to her throne. They vanished, disgraced or dead, their falls cloaked in whispers of poison and betrayal. Darker still were the rumors about her own child, a daughter, some said, strangled in her cradle to frame her enemies. Was it true, or a lie spun by those who feared her? Wu never answered, her silence a shield as she ascended to Empress in 655. Her methods were ruthless, her heart a vault of secrets. Each move was a chess play, sacrificing pawns to claim the board, her eyes fixed on a prize no woman had dared touch. By 690, Wu Zetian did the unthinkable. She declared herself emperor, the only woman to claim that title in China's history. She shattered Confucian norms, which preached women's subservience, and ruled with an iron hand softened by silk. Her court buzzed with reforms. She opened exams to commoners, strengthened the empire's borders, and patronized Buddhist temples, her faith a counterpoint to the scholars who despised her. Her reign was a paradox, progress built on fear, prosperity shadowed by suspicion. She governed for decades, her will bending an empire to her vision, but her enemies never forgave her audacity. They painted her as a usurper, a sorceress, her power a crime against the natural order. When she died in 705, Wu's legacy was a battleground. To some, she was a visionary, dragging China into a new age. To others, a villainess whose ruthlessness stained the throne. Myths grew like vines, twisting her story into one of cruelty and seduction. Yet her reign endured, a testament to a woman who rewrote the rules of power. Her name lingered, a whisper of awe and unease, a reminder that ambition could reshape an empire, or break it. As Wu's shadow faded across China's vast plains, another queen star rose in the rugged mountains of Georgia. Tamar, a ruler of piety and passion, was about to forge a golden age, her reign a tapestry of faith and fire that would light up the Caucasus. In the rugged embrace of 12th century Georgia, where mountains stood like sentinels and rivers sang of ancient dreams, Tamar rose not as a queen, but as a king, crowned with a title that echoed her unbreakable will. She was no mere ruler. She was the heart of Georgia's golden age, her reign a symphony of strength and grace that lifted her kingdom to dazzling heights. At 20, she took the throne beside her father, her eyes alight with a vision that would make Georgia a beacon in the Caucasus. When he died, she cast aside tradition's chains, ruling alone, her presence a melody that silenced doubters and inspired poets to weave her name into legend. Tamar's first challenge was a marriage pushed upon her, a Russian prince, Yuri, whose temper clashed with her fire. The union was a storm, brief and bitter. She endured him until his recklessness became a threat, then banished him with a queen's resolve, choosing to rule solo in a world that demanded a man at her side. Her court, vibrant with silk and song, became a stage for her brilliance. She led armies to victory, expanded trade, and built churches that gleamed under the mountain sun. Yet, it was her allure that captivated most. Poets sang of her beauty, their verses dripping with devotion so vivid it sparked whispers. Were these odes mere art, or hints of loves that bloomed in secret corners of her palace? The court buzzed with tales of Tamar's charm, her smile a spark that kindled hearts. A noble here, a knight there. Rumors swirled of entanglements, though none could pin her down. She was a riddle, her laughter both a crown and a veil. Her second marriage, to a prince of her choosing, was steadier, but the poet's songs lingered, painting her as a muse who inspired more than loyalty. Her reign was no dry chronicle of battles. It was a tapestry of faith and fire, where every triumph carried a hint of flirtatious mystery. Tamar didn't just govern, she enchanted, her kingdom a canvas where power and passion danced in harmony. When she died in 1213, Tamar's legacy was immortalized, not just in stone, but in spirit. The Orthodox Church named her a saint, her name a prayer on the lips of her people. She was no distant figure. She was Georgia's heart, her reign a golden thread that still shines in the nation's memory. Saint and king, Tamar left a light too bright to dim, her story a song that echoed through the ages. As Tamar's reign faded into the glow of history, let's turn to a season that warmed the medieval world with light and revelry. The Christmas feasts of old, rich with tradition and mischief, await us, ready to unfold their own tales of joy and defiance. As winter's chill settled over the medieval world, the 12 days of Christmas, stretching from December 25 to Epiphany, transformed villages and castles into a tapestry of faith and revelry. This wasn't the tidy holiday of modern times, wrapped in ribbons and predictable cheer. No, medieval Christmas was a wild, sacred marathon, a season where the divine and the drunken danced under candlelit skies. From snow-dusted hamlets to towering cathedrals, the air hummed with anticipation, each day a new chapter in a celebration that could lift your soul to heaven or send you stumbling into a tavern. It began with the birth of Christ, but it unfolded into a spectacle where piety and mischief shared the same table, their clash as warm as the fires that burned through the long winter nights. The season kicked off with Christmas Day, a solemn nod to the manger, where villagers crowded into churches, their breath fogging in the frosty air as priests chanted in Latin. But solemnity didn't linger long. By evening, the tables groaned under roasted boar, spiced wine, and bread baked in shapes that mocked the ordinary. The sacred gave way to the chaotic, as neighbors spilled into the streets, their voices raised in songs that were half hymn, half revel. St. Stephen's Day followed, honoring the first martyr with alms for the poor, but also with horse races and rowdy games that left fields trampled and spirits high. The Feast of the Holy Innocents, marking Herod's grim decree, brought a strange twist. Children were crowned bishops for a day, leading processions with a glee that turned sorrow into play. Each day had its own flavor, a blend of devotion and defiance. The Feast of St. John called for blessed wine, sipped in quiet reverence, but by night, the same wine fueled dances that spilled into the snow. The nobility hosted lavish banquets, their halls alive with minstrels and mummers, while peasants lit bonfires, their laughter echoing against the stars. This was no single day of gift-giving. It was a 12-day whirlwind where the sacred and the profane collided. The church preached salvation, but the people craved celebration, and Christmas gave them both, wrapped in a paradox as rich as the season's spiced ale. By the time Epiphany loomed, marking the Magi's arrival, the world was either exalted or exhausted, often both. Villages glowed with candlelight, and churches rang with hymns, but the streets buzzed with the last gasps of revelry. Lords and ladies donned their finest, while jesters mocked them in plays that turned the world upside down. It was a season that held you close, its warmth a shield against winter's bite, its stories a fire that burned through the dark. As the 12 days wound down, the medieval world turned its gaze to the decorations that made Christmas a feast for the eyes. From evergreen boughs to flickering candles, the season's beauty was about to weave its own magic, dressing the world in a splendor that matched its wild heart. In the heart of a medieval winter, when frost clung to stone and breath hung in the air, the halls of lords and peasants alike came alive with the green pulse of Christmas. No twinkling trees or tidy wreaths here. Medieval folk draped their world in holly, ivy, and mistletoe, their sharp leaves and bright berries a defiant stand against the gray of winter. These weren't just decorations. They were echoes of pagan days, when druids crowned oaks with sacred boughs. The church, ever practical, wove them into Christian tales. Holly's red berries became Christ's blood, ivy, a symbol of eternal life. Every sprig hung over doorways or twined around beams carried a whisper of ancient magic, blending the old gods with the new in a dance as old as the hills. At the heart of the feast, a spectacle stole the show. The boar's head, roasted to a golden sheen, an apple clamped in its jaws like a silent proclamation. Servants paraded it into the hall, their voices raised in a carol that rang through the rafters, the beast's glassy eyes staring down guests like a festive judge. It wasn't just food. It was theater, a symbol of strength and sacrifice. Its arrival met with cheers and the clink of goblets. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat, mingling with the sharp tang of pine and the sweet burn of spiced wine. Minstrels strummed lutes, their songs weaving tales of kings and saints, while the greenery above seemed to sway with the music, as if the forest itself had joined the revelry. The halls were a feast for the senses. Candles flickered on tables, casting shadows that danced across walls draped in evergreen. Mistletoe hung in corners, its white berries a promise of stolen kisses, though priests frowned at the pagan mischief it invited. Every decoration told a story. Holly for protection, ivy for fidelity, each leaf a thread tying the sacred to the wild. The church blessed the season, but the people embraced its chaos, their laughter filling spaces where sermons couldn't reach. From castle to cottage, the scene was the same. Tables laden with bread and ale, fires roaring, and the green heart of winter pulsing through every song and sip. This was Christmas as a living thing, its beauty as untamed as the boar it celebrated. The decorations weren't just adornments. They were a bridge between worlds, where faith and folklore met in a riot of color and scent. As the hall glowed under their spell, the feasts themselves were waiting, ready to spill over with excess that would make even the hardiest reveler pause. Let's step into those banquets now, where tables groaned under the weight of indulgence, and the medieval Christmas reached its wild, delicious peak. In the medieval Christmas season, feasts were more than meals. They were spectacles, where power and piety clashed over laden tables. Castles and manors transformed into stages of opulence, their long halls groaning under the weight of dishes that dazzled the eye as much as the palate. Nobles dined on roasted peacocks, their iridescent feathers fanned out like trophies, or swans carved with a flourish, their richness a testament to wealth. Marzipan castles, sculpted with sugary precision, stood as edible monuments to a lord's dominion. Every bite was a performance, each dish a declaration of status, served on silver platters that gleamed under torchlight. The air was thick with the scent of roasted game, cinnamon, and ambition, as lords and ladies reveled in their excess. For peasants, the feast was a rarer joy. Where nobles gorged on venison and delicate pastries, villagers savored a hard-won piece of pork or a humble loaf, their tables sparse but their spirits high. Christmas was one of the few times meat graced their plates, a treat that tasted of freedom from the daily grind of gruel and greens. In smoky cottages, families gathered around flickering hearths, their laughter mingling with the crackle of fire, their simple fare elevated by the season's magic. Yet, even here, the hierarchy lingered. Lords might send scraps to the village, a gesture of charity that reminded all who held the reins of power. Drinks flowed like rivers, fueling the festive chaos. Wassail, a spiced ale warm as the hearth, filled bowls passed from hand to hand, its sweetness loosening tongues until songs and secrets spilled freely. Hippocras, a wine laced with cloves and ginger, was the noble's choice, its exotic warmth a luxury that set them apart. These drinks weren't just refreshments, they were the pulse of the feast, turning solemn toasts into raucous cheers, a sip too many, and night slurred tales of valor, while maids giggled over forbidden glances. The line between reverence and revelry blurred as the hall became a whirlwind of clinking goblets and unchecked mirth. Even in celebration, the medieval world wore its hierarchy like armor. At the high table, lords and their favored guests sat above the rest, their plates piled higher, their cups never empty. Below, lesser nobles and retainers jostled for seats closer to power, each place a silent marker of rank. Servants darted through the chaos, their hands swift but their presence invisible, ensuring the mighty were fed before the meek. Every dish was a flex, every seat a reminder of who ruled the hall, even as the season preached unity. The feast was both a gift and a chain, binding all to the order beneath the merriment. As plates emptied and candles burned low, the feast set the stage for a figure who thrived on turning order upside down. The Lord of Misrule, crowned in jest, was about to step into the light, ready to lead the Christmas chaos into its wildest dance yet. In the heart of the medieval Christmas, when the world was alight with fire and frost, a figure emerged to turn it upside down. The Lord of Misrule. This wasn't a king born of blood or gold, but a servant, a cleric, or even a fool, crowned for a fleeting reign of glorious chaos. For the 12 days of Christmas, he was the master of revelry, his scepter a jester's staff, his throne a barrel in a smoky hall. Villages and castles bowed to his whims as he declared absurd edicts, nobles to dance like peasants, knights to serve ale, or maids to lead mock trials where the mighty were judged by the meek. His rule was a gleeful rebellion, a spark that lit the season with laughter and defiance. The halls erupted in pandemonium, servants donned lords' cloaks, issuing commands with exaggerated swagger, while nobles played along, their dignity traded for a night of jest. Mock courts sprang up, where a farmer might sentence a knight to sing a bawdy tune, or a lady to juggle apples. The air rang with cheers, the clatter of tankards, and the squeals of those caught in the game. In churches, the boy bishop tradition stole the show. A child, robed in a mitre too big for his head, preached sermons that mixed giggles with gospel. It was absurd yet holy, a reminder that even the sacred could wear a playful mask. These young bishops led processions, their tiny voices echoing through stone naves, as congregations marveled at the topsy-turvy world. This chaos wasn't just fun, it was a release, a valve for a society bound by rigid chains. For 12 days, the low could mock the high, the poor could play at power, and the world could laugh at itself. The Lord of Misrule flipped the hierarchy, letting servants taste command and nobles feel humility, if only for a night. It was a catharsis, a way to vent the pressures of a world where rank ruled every breath. Yet beneath the revelry, there was purpose. By letting chaos reign briefly, the old order was strengthened, its return all the more certain when the candles burned out. The madness was a mirror, showing what could be but never was, beyond the season's glow. As the Lord of Misrule's reign faded, his laughter lingered, carried on the voices of carolers who took to the streets. Their songs, rowdy and bold, were no gentle lullabies. They were a ritual of music and mischief, demanding ale or coin with a grin and a tune, ready to weave the next thread of Christmas chaos. In the frosty lanes of medieval villages, where moonlight danced on snow, caroling was no gentle serenade. It was a rollicking, cheeky demand for reward, wrapped in song and swagger. Carolers, young and old, spilled into the night, their voices a boisterous tide that swept through hamlets and manor gates. They weren't just singing for joy, they were on a mission, their tunes a mix of praise and playful extortion. Armed with bells, lutes, and boundless nerve, they roamed from door to door, their breath fogging the air as they belted out verses that could charm a coin or shame a miser. Christmas caroling was a ritual where music met mischief, and every note carried the promise of a full tankard or a curse sung with a grin. The songs were as bold as the singers. "Bring Us in Good Ale" was a favorite, its chorus a blunt demand for drink, each verse a nudge to open the cellar or face a lyrical roasting. The Boar's Head Carol thundered through great halls, celebrating the feast's centerpiece with gusto, its rhythm echoing the stomp of boots on frozen earth. These weren't polite hymns. They were anthems of revelry, raw and unpolished, their words weaving tales of feasting, faith, and defiance. Carolers danced as they sang, their movements a whirl of cloaks and laughter, turning streets into stages where the whole village could join the show. Refuse their song? You'd hear verses mocking your stinginess, sung loud enough for neighbors to chuckle. Wassailing was the heart of this musical mayhem. Carolers didn't just want applause, they expected ale, bread, or a slice of the feast. In return, their songs promised luck, a blessing for the household that shared its bounty. Wassailing was a pact. Give us your best, and we'll sing your fields fertile, your home prosperous. In orchards, wassailers toasted apple trees with cider, their chants a plea for a bountiful harvest. It was part superstition, part celebration, a ritual that tied the community to the land and each other. Every song was a thread, stitching rich to poor, young to old, in a tapestry of shared warmth against winter's bite. The clink of mugs and the roar of voices forged a camaraderie that lingered long after the last note faded. This wasn't just singing. It was a declaration, a moment when the village claimed its right to joy. Carolers, with their cheeky demands and hearty laughter, wove luck and unity into the season's heart. As their voices rose and fell, they carried the spirit of Christmas through the dark, a reminder that even in the coldest nights, song could spark warmth. As the carolers' echoes faded, another tradition glowed brighter. The Yule log, a massive heart of oak or ash, burning at the center of the festive hearth, its flames a promise of light and life through the long winter. In the heart of a medieval winter, when the world was cloaked in frost and shadow, the Yule log burned as a beacon of hope and defiance. This wasn't just a fire, it was a ritual, a massive oak or ash log hauled into the hearth to blaze through all 12 days of Christmas. Its glow warmed stone halls and humble cottages alike, its crackle a song that drowned out the howl of the wind. Rooted in pagan times, when fires honored the sun's return, the Yule log carried ancient magic into Christian homes. To light it was to summon life itself, a promise that light would outlast the longest nights, its flames a shield against the cold and the unknown. The ritual was steeped in superstition. Families chose their log with care, often dragging it through snow with songs and laughter, as if coaxing a giant to wake. They lit it with embers saved from the previous year's fire, a thread of continuity that tied one Christmas to the next. The log had to burn steady, its endurance a sign of good fortune. Ashes were precious, sprinkled in fields for fertile harvests, or tucked under beds to ward off evil. Some whispered that a cow who nibbled those ashes would birth strong calves, though wiser folk kept them safe from wandering livestock. Every spark was a charm, every flicker a whisper of the old gods woven into the new faith. Around the Yule log, families gathered, their faces bathed in its golden glow. In castles, lords and ladies sat close, their silks brushing the hearth as minstrels spun tales of heroes. In villages, peasants huddled on straw, sharing stories of saints or mischievous spirits who roamed the winter dark. The fire was a storyteller's stage, its warmth loosening tongues as wassail flowed. Children listened wide-eyed to tales of knights or ghosts, while elders recounted winters past, their voices blending with the log's soft crackle. The hearth was the heart of the home, where the season's magic lived, binding young and old in a circle of light and memory. The Yule log's glow wasn't just warmth, it was a promise, a reminder that life endured even in winter's grip. As it burned, it carried the hopes of those who watched it, their prayers rising with the smoke. When the 12 days ended, its ashes were gathered like relics, a keepsake of the season's fleeting joy. As the fire's embers settled, the Christmas spirit turned to lighter delights. Gift-giving and games, brimming with laughter and mischief, waited to spark joy, bringing the season's playful side into the glow of the medieval hearth. As the medieval Christmas season unfolded, its frosty nights warmed with the clatter of games and the quiet joy of gifts. Gift-giving wasn't the lavish affair of modern times. It was a humble exchange, often saved for New Year's Day or Epiphany. A child might wake to a handful of nuts, their shells gleaming like treasures, or a carved wooden toy, its edges smoothed by a father's careful knife. Lords gifted coins or cloth to loyal servants, while peasants shared apples or a loaf baked with care. These tokens, simple as they were, carried the season's heart, a gesture of goodwill that bound neighbors in a world where winter made every kindness count. Each gift was a spark, lighting up the dark with a promise of connection. But the true pulse of Christmas was its games, a riot of laughter and mischief that turned halls into playgrounds. Hoodman Blind was a favorite, where a blindfolded player stumbled through a crowd, grabbing at giggling foes to guess their names. Miss a guess, and the laughter roared louder than the wind outside. Hot cockles tested nerve. One player, eyes covered, knelt as others swatted, the challenge to name the striker. Bruises and spilled ale were as common as cheers, the line between sport and scuffle delightfully blurred. Wrestling matches saw knights and farmers alike grapple in the snow, their breath clouding the air as bets and boasts flew. These games weren't just fun. They were a release, a chance to shake off winter's weight with a reckless grin. Mummers' plays brought a wilder magic. Villagers donned masks, transforming into devils, dragons, or saints. Their performances a chaotic blend of faith and farce. In great halls, these plays turned stone walls into theaters, where a mock St. George battled a straw-stuffed beast to roars of delight. Meanwhile, the clever gathered for intellectual sparring. Riddles danced over tankards of ale, each one a puzzle to unravel before the next round was poured. Chess, the game of kings, saw lords and ladies hunched over boards, their moves as sharp as their wits, often with wagers of wine or pride. Every game, from rough to refined, wove the community closer, the season's joy a thread through every shout and strategy. These moments of play balanced the sacred weight of Christmas, letting the medieval world breathe. Laughter rang as loudly as church bells, binding high and low in a shared delight that made the cold nights feel alive. As the games faded and tankards emptied, the season called its people to a deeper ritual. Midnight Mass, the sacred heart of Christmas, waited in the glow of candlelit churches, ready to anchor the revelry with a moment of solemn grace. In the dead of a medieval winter night, when stars pierced the sky like silent prayers, the midnight Mass of Christmas Eve drew the faithful to churches, aglow with trembling light. On December 25th, villages and castles emptied as people trudged through snow to stone chapels, their breath fogging in the chill. Inside, candles flickered like captured stars, casting shadows on walls worn smooth by centuries of worship. Incense curled upward, its sweet haze mingling with the murmured chants of priests, their Latin a rhythm that felt older than the earth itself. The air was heavy with awe. Every face, lord, peasant, child, turned toward the altar, where the story of a manger unfolded in song and silence. The Christmas season held 3 masses, each a thread in the sacred tapestry. The midnight Mass, called the Angel's Mass, celebrated the shepherd's joy, its hymns soaring like wings in the dark. At dawn, the shepherd's Mass honored the humble who first saw the Christ child, its quiet simplicity a balm for weary souls. By midday, the Mass of the Divine Word crowned the day, a nod to the eternal light born in a stable. Congregations sat on cold benches, their bodies stiff but hearts warmed, each service a reminder of a miracle that bound them to something greater. The church was a refuge, its walls a shield against winter's cruelty and the world's harsh edges. Nativity plays brought the story to life, turning stone naves into Bethlehem's fields. Villagers donned rough costumes, angels with crooked halos, shepherds with staffs of gnarled wood. Children played the Holy Family, their earnest faces glowing under candlelight. But medieval devotion had its quirks. A sheep might bolt mid-scene, or a tipsy mummer might stumble as Herod, drawing laughs from the pews. These mishaps, far from breaking the spell, wove the community tighter, their shared chuckles a reminder that faith could be human, messy, and warm. The plays weren't just performances. They were a mirror, reflecting a world where the divine touched the everyday. Midnight Mass was more than ritual. It was the season's heart, a moment when rich and poor knelt as equals. In a world of hunger and hardship, it offered unity, its glow a promise that light could endure. As voices joined in hymns, the church became a hearth, warming souls against the cold night. As the Masses ended, the Christmas season built toward its radiant close. Epiphany, the grand finale, waited with its own splendor, ready to crown the 12 days with a celebration of kings and revelations. As the medieval Christmas reached its crescendo, Epiphany arrived like a golden crown on the 12th night, January 6th, a day to honor the Magi who followed a star to Bethlehem. Villages and cities burst into life with processions that wound through snowy streets, banners fluttering and bells ringing under a winter sky. Priests blessed homes with incense and chalk, their prayers mingling with the scent of pine and wax, while children chased after masked figures dressed as the three kings, their robes trailing like dreams. Epiphany was a celebration of revelation, a moment when the divine shone through the ordinary, yet it carried a wild, triumphant energy, as if the season itself was determined to burn brightest before fading. The 12th night was the season's grand finale, a night of revelry that rivaled the stars for brilliance. Halls echoed with laughter as feasts spilled over with roasted goose, honeyed cakes, and flagons of spiced ale. The king and queen of the bean ruled the night, chosen by chance when a hidden bean or pea was found in a slice of cake. A peasant might wear a paper crown, issuing playful commands to lords, while a lady giggled as her queen led a tipsy dance. These mock monarchs turned the world upside down one last time, their brief reign a spark of chaos before the order of the year returned. Gifts flowed freely, ribbons, small trinkets, or a final round of nuts, each one a farewell to the season's warmth. The feasts were a spectacle, tables heavy with the last of the season's bounty. Minstrels strummed tales of the Magi, their songs weaving awe and mischief, while mummers staged raucous plays, their masks glinting in the firelight. The air was thick with the scents of roasted meat and cloves, the hall a whirl of color and sound. Yet beneath the exuberance, a bittersweet note lingered. Epiphany marked the end, the moment when winter's magic would give way to the grind of ordinary days. As goblets clinked and voices rose, there was a quiet ache, a longing to hold on to the light just a little longer. When the night ended, the decorations came down. Holly and ivy were swept from beams, their green fading like a dream. The yule log, now a pile of ash, was carefully gathered, its dust saved for luck, sprinkled in fields or kept in pouches to ward off misfortune. The hearth grew cold, and the season's spell dissolved, leaving only memories of its glow. Epiphany was both a triumph and a farewell, a final burst of joy before the world turned back to its routines. As the last embers of Christmas faded, let's journey to an older celebration, one that shaped its wild heart. Saturnalia, the Roman festival of revelry and rebellion, awaits, its chaos the root of the medieval season's untamed spirit. In the ancient streets of Rome, where marble gleamed under a winter sun, Saturnalia burst forth like a river breaking its banks. This was no mere festival. It was a glorious upheaval, a week when the mighty city shed its stern order for a wild celebration of freedom and excess. Held in mid-December to honor Saturn, the god of time and harvest, Saturnalia was a glimpse of a world turned upside down, where slaves dined like kings and rules dissolved into laughter. From towering temples to humble homes, Rome pulsed with a joy so fierce it echoed through centuries, planting the seeds of the medieval Christmas we know. The air was alive with the clink of cups and the roar of crowds, every corner humming with the promise of mischief. The festival began with a solemn spark at Saturn's temple, its columns draped in garlands, the altar warm with offerings. Priests sacrificed oxen, their prayers rising with the smoke, a nod to the god who promised bounty. Then the gates of revelry swung wide. A public banquet spilled across the forum, tables laden with bread, wine, and roasted meat, where senators and commoners sat shoulder to shoulder. The feast was a great equalizer, its chaos a gift to a city bound by rigid laws. Rich and poor shared plates, their laughter mingling as the wine flowed, the day a fleeting dream of unity under a winter sky that sparkled like polished bronze. For a week, Rome paused its relentless march. Shops shuttered, courts fell silent, and even wars took a breath. The city became a playground, its streets filled with song and the clatter of dice. Citizens donned colorful robes, casting off the white togas of duty for the bright hues of freedom. Children chased through markets, their hands sticky with honeyed treats, while adults wagered coins on games or danced under torches that lit the night. Saturnalia wasn't just a holiday, it was a rebellion against time itself, a chance to live as if the world could always be this wild, this free. The usual order, with its hierarchies and judgments, was locked away, replaced by a spirit that laughed at restraint. This was only the beginning. Saturnalia's true magic lay in what came next. When masters served slaves and the low became high, the festival's heart beating in a chaos that would shape the revels of centuries to come. Let's step into that world now, where role reversals turned Rome into a stage for the wildest dreams of its people. In the heart of Saturnalia's riotous week, Rome became a stage where the world flipped upside down, and the impossible felt real. For a few glorious days, the rigid lines of Roman society, master and slave, high and low, dissolved into a whirl of laughter and defiance. The most astonishing ritual was the sight of masters serving slaves. In villas and taverns, slaves lounged at the head of the table, their faces lit with astonishment as their masters, draped in aprons, poured wine and carved meat. A senator might kneel to offer bread to a stable hand, while a merchant's wife giggled as she served ale to a kitchen maid. It wasn't just a meal. It was a rebellion, a fleeting dream where the downtrodden tasted power, their laughter louder than the clink of goblets. The festival crowned its own king, a mock monarch chosen by chance or jest, often a slave or commoner with a glint of mischief in their eye. This Saturnalia king, adorned with a paper crown and a staff of reeds, issued commands as absurd as they were joyous. A senator might be ordered to bray like a donkey mid-dance, or a matron to sing a bawdy tune to a roaring crowd. These decrees sparked chaos, nobles stumbling through silly tasks, their dignity traded for grins, while the crowd cheered their temporary lord. The king's reign was a farce, yet it held a mirror to Rome's iron order, showing how fragile power could be when laughter ruled the day. For slaves, Saturnalia was a breath of freedom, a chance to sit tall, eat richly, and speak boldly without fear of the whip. The catharsis was electric. They could mock their masters, demand service, and revel in a world where they were kings. For masters, it was a humbling reminder, a glimpse of their own vulnerability as they played the servant's part. Yet, this equality was a fleeting star, bright, beautiful, and gone by dawn. When the festival ended, chains returned, and the old order snapped back like a taut rope. The memory of those meals lingered, though, a whisper of what might be in a world less bound by rank. Saturnalia's reversal wasn't just play, it was a safety valve, letting Rome exhale its tensions before the year resumed its grind. Slaves savored their moment, masters laughed at their own fall, and for a week, the city was won. But as the tables cleared and the mock crowns crumbled, the festival's wilder pastimes beckoned. Gambling and drinking, the heartbeat of Saturnalia's chaos, waited to sweep Romans into a whirlwind of dice, wine, and reckless abandon. As Saturnalia's wild week swept through ancient Rome, the city threw off its stoic mask and plunged into a frenzy of gambling and drunken revelry. Streets, taverns, and villas pulsed with the clatter of dice and knucklebones. Games once reserved for the elite now played by all. Slaves, freed from their chains for the festival, tossed bones alongside senators, their bets as bold as their laughter. Coins vanished in heaps, wagered on a single roll, while cheers and groans filled the air like a storm. Every throw was a gamble, not just of money but of Rome's rigid order, as the low and high staked their fortunes under the same torchlit glow. Wine was the festival's lifeblood, flowing like rivers through every gathering. Spiced with cinnamon and honey, it filled goblets, bowls, and bellies, its warmth loosening tongues and inhibitions. Taverns brimmed with revelers, their toasts not to Jupiter or duty, but to chaos itself. A merchant might slur a poem to a barmaid, while a matron danced on a table, her sandals kicking aside decorum. Homes turned into makeshift casinos, tables littered with dice, spilled wine, and half-eaten figs. The air was thick with the scent of mulled wine and the roar of laughter as Romans embraced a reckless joy that mocked their usual restraint. This wasn't just indulgence, it was rebellion. Rome, so proud of its discipline, surrendered to Saturnalia's call to forget virtue and grab a goblet. Slaves wagered stolen moments of power, citizens bet away their savings, and the city itself seemed to sway with the drunken tide. A soldier might lose his cloak to a shepherd, only to laugh and pour another round. Women, men, young, old, all were swept up, their voices blending into a chorus that drowned out the Senate's decrees. For a week, the empire was a playground, its rules buried under a pile of dice and empty jugs, each reveler a king in their own fleeting empire of excess. The chaos wasn't aimless. It was a release, a chance to break free from Rome's iron grip and live without fear of judgment. But even in this whirlwind, a figure emerged to steer the madness. The king of Saturnalia, crowned with jest and audacity, was ready to take the festival's anarchy to its peak, his absurd reign a beacon for the wildest dreams of a city unmoored. In the heart of Saturnalia's wild week, when Rome was drunk on wine and freedom, a figure rose to rule the chaos, the king of Saturnalia. No noble or senator, this king was often a slave, plucked from the shadows of servitude and crowned with a wreath of vines, his grin as unsteady as the wine in his cup. For a few glorious days, he was the lord of misrule, his word law in a city that had forgotten its rules. His throne was a barrel, his scepter a reed, but his power was real, at least until the festival's end. The streets roared with laughter as Romans bowed to his whims, their cheers a hymn to a world turned gleefully upside down. The king's commands were as absurd as they were joyous. He might order a merchant to sing a love song to a fig, or a stern matron to dance like a goat through the forum. Senators recited mock orations praising the virtues of a sandal, their faces red with mirth or wine. Crowds gathered, egging on the madness, as a baker juggled loaves or a soldier mimed a peacock's strut. Every decree was a spark, igniting bursts of laughter that echoed off marble walls. The king's court was no grand palace but a tavern or marketplace, where slaves and citizens alike played along, their roles swapped in a dizzying whirl of jest. It was chaos with a purpose, a chance to mock the rigid order that chained Rome's days. At the heart of his coronation was a tradition as old as the festival, the bean and cake. A cake, baked with a single bean hidden inside, was sliced and shared. Whoever found the bean was king, their luck a fleeting crown that mirrored the Epiphany customs centuries later. The moment was electric. A slave might rise from the table, bean in hand, to rule over nobles who laughed and bowed. It was a game, but it carried a deeper truth. For a moment, fate could lift the lowliest to the heights, reminding all that power was as fickle as a roll of dice. Yet Saturnalia's magic was fleeting. When the week ended, the king's crown was cast aside, his reign dissolving like smoke. Rome snapped back to its iron order, slaves returned to chains, masters to thrones. The laughter faded, replaced by the clink of coins and the march of soldiers. king of Saturnalia's brief rule was a mirror, reflecting a world where freedom was possible, if only for a moment. It reminded Romans of their shared humanity, but also of the chains that waited when the wine ran dry. As the king's reign ended, another Saturnalia tradition sparkled in the fading light. Gift-giving, quirky, and heartfelt, filled homes and streets, weaving bonds of joy that carried the festival's spirit into Rome's heart. As Saturnalia's wild week swept through Rome, the air filled with the clink of coins and the laughter of gift-giving, a tradition known as sigillaria that turned the festival into a celebration of quirky, heartfelt generosity. Markets bustled with stalls offering wax figurines, tiny gods, animals, or grinning faces, molded with care and traded with a wink. These weren't grand treasures. They were tokens of joy, passed between friends, lovers, and neighbors. A baker might hand a merchant a honeyed fig, while a child clutched a clay whistle shaped like a bird. Edible treats, nuts, dates, or cakes dusted with spices, were swapped with grins, their sweetness a reminder of life's simple pleasures in a city of marble and ambition. Candles were the stars of sigillaria, their flickering flames a nod to Saturn's promise of light in winter's dark. Romans gifted them by the bundle, their glow warming homes and hearts alike. Then there were the bolder gifts, phallic charms, carved from wood or clay, dangled from necks or doorways as cheeky talismans for luck and fertility. The prudish might blush, but Romans laughed, embracing the bawdy humor as part of the festival's irreverence. These trinkets, from wax satyrs to risque pendants, were more than gifts. They were a playful defiance of Rome's usual stoicism, a chance to revel in the absurd and the human. Children were the heart of sigillaria, their eyes wide with delight as they joined the festivities. They scampered through markets, clutching tiny toys, a wooden horse, a rattling ball, or sticky handfuls of sweets that left their fingers gleaming. For once, they could boss adults around, demanding extra treats with a giggle, their voices rising above the din of the festival. Parents indulged them, slipping them a fig or a carved doll, knowing Saturnalia was their time to shine. The gifts weren't lavish, but their warmth lingered, tying families and communities in bonds stronger than the wax they were molded from. Every trinket told a story, every sweet a shared smile. Sigillaria's charm lay in its simplicity, a humble exchange that made even slaves feel part of Rome's beating heart. A candle, a crude charm, or a crumbling cake carried more than luck. They carried love, laughter, and a fleeting sense of equality. As these gifts passed hand to hand, they lit up the festival's final days with a glow that rivaled the stars. With gifts tucked away, Saturnalia's spirit turned to its vibrant aesthetic, where mockery and merriment dressed the city in colors and chaos that would make even the gods laugh. As Saturnalia swept through ancient Rome, the city shed its somber togas for a riot of color and irreverence, dressing itself in a vibrant defiance of everyday norms. Gone were the stark white robes of duty. Romans donned synthesis robes, their bright hues of crimson, saffron, and emerald swirling through streets like a living mosaic. Men, women, and even slaves pinned on the pileus, a conical felt hat once reserved for freedmen, its pointed crown a symbol of liberty worn with a smirk. These weren't just clothes, they were a rebellion, a declaration that for 1 week Rome could laugh at its own rules, its people cloaked in the wild joy of a world turned upside down. The city itself became a canvas. Greenery draped doorways, laurel, pine, and ivy twined into wreaths that echoed the medieval holly yet to come. Candles flickered on every sill, their flames dancing like stars brought down to earth, casting a warm glow over markets and homes. Garlands hung across arches, their leaves catching the winter sun, while wax figurines from sigillaria grinned from tables. The air smelled of pine and smoke, a sensory hymn to Saturn's reign. These decorations weren't mere adornments, they were a bridge to older rites, when Romans honored the earth's bounty, their sparkle a nod to a time when gods walked closer to men. Then came the mock processions, Saturnalia's sharpest jab at authority. Crowds gathered to watch parodies that turned gods and senators into clowns. A baker might don a fake laurel crown, strutting as Jupiter while waving a loaf like a thunderbolt, his thunderous laugh outshining the god himself. A donkey, draped in a senator's robe, brayed through the forum to roars of delight. These parades were pure satire, skewering the mighty with a wit that spared no one. Not consuls, not priests, not even the divine. Romans clapped and jeered, their laughter a release from the weight of empire, a chance to poke fun at the powers that ruled their lives. Saturnalia's mockery was more than jest. It was a safety valve, letting Rome exhale its tensions. By laughing at Jupiter or a senator's pomp, the people reclaimed a sliver of power, if only for a week. The festival's chaos was a celebration of joy, yes, but also a reminder that authority was a mask, easily mocked when the wine flowed and the pileus tilted just so. The gods didn't seem to mind, and neither did the crowds, who danced through the night with a freedom that felt eternal, even if it wasn't. Beneath this colorful chaos lay a deeper pulse, a sacred root that fed Saturnalia's wild heart. Let's step into that quieter space now, where the festival's ancient rituals and offerings revealed a reverence as profound as its revelry. Beneath the riotous laughter and wine-soaked revelry of Saturnalia lay a sacred pulse, a thread that wove the festival back to Rome's ancient roots. This was a celebration born in honor of Saturn, the god of time and harvest, whose mythical golden age promised a world without want or hierarchy. Romans believed that long ago, under Saturn's gentle reign, fields bloomed without toil, and all shared the earth's bounty as equals. Saturnalia was their chance to touch that lost paradise, to summon its spirit for one fleeting week. As winter's darkest days cloaked the city, the festival became a hymn to hope, a reminder that even in shadow, light could return. The rituals began at the Temple of Saturn, its columns standing like sentinels in the Forum. There, priests gathered in the chill dawn, their breath clouding as they offered sacrifices, oxen or grain, to appease the god. The heart of the ceremony was a quiet act of defiance. They unbound Saturn's statue, its woolen ties loosened to free his spirit. For Romans, this was no mere gesture. It was a release, a moment when the god's benevolence flowed into the city, dissolving chains of rank and duty. The temple glowed with candles, their flames a prayer for the sun's rebirth, as citizens looked to the winter solstice with a mix of awe and longing. Saturnalia's timing was no accident. It fell at the solstice, when the days were shortest and the world seemed to hold its breath. The festival was a rebellion against darkness, its feasts and fires a call for the sun to return. Candles lit every home, their flicker a promise that light would triumph. The public banquet that followed the temple rites was a taste of the golden age. Tables stretched across the Forum, where rich and poor ate as one, their laughter a fleeting echo of a world without masters. Every song, every shared loaf, was a reenactment of that mythic plenty, a dream that equality could live, if only for a moment. This wasn't just revelry, it was a sacred act, a way to honor Saturn by living his vision. The chaos of role reversals, the gifts, the mockery, all were offerings to a god who asked for joy over solemnity. Saturnalia reminded Romans of their shared humanity, a truth buried under the empire's weight, but unearthed each winter. As the candles burned and the wine flowed, the festival wove faith and freedom into a tapestry of light. As Saturnalia's sacred fires dimmed, their glow lingered in the traditions that followed. Let's trace those sparks now, into the medieval Christmas, where Rome's ancient revels shaped a season of faith and festivity. As the Roman Empire faded, its wildest festival, Saturnalia, left echoes that shaped the Christmas we know. Early Christians, planting their faith in a pagan world, saw the solstice-timed revelry and claimed it for their own. December's dark days, once a stage for Saturn's worship, became the backdrop for Christ's birth, a new light to rival the sun's return. The church didn't erase Saturnalia's spirit. It borrowed its playbook, weaving gift-giving, greenery, and joyous chaos into the fabric of Christmas. What began as a Roman roar softened into a Christian hymn, but the heart of the celebration, its warmth, its defiance of winter's gloom, remained, a thread connecting ancient temples to medieval hearths. The overlaps were striking. Saturnalia's wax figurines and honeyed treats found new life in Christmas gifts. Nuts, toys, and trinkets passed with a smile. The ivy and laurel that draped Roman homes became holly and mistletoe, their green a promise of life in the dead of winter. Role reversals, where slaves played masters, echoed in the Lord of Misrule and boy bishops, turning order upside down for a night. Even the feasts, with their overflowing tables and flowing wine, carried Saturnalia's spirit, as medieval folk raised goblets in halls that rang with laughter. These weren't mere coincidences. They were a quiet conquest, the church folding pagan joy into its sacred story, making Christmas a season where faith and festivity danced together. Not everyone rejoiced. Church leaders like Augustine, with his stern brow, grumbled at the excess. They saw shadows of pagan gods in the drunken songs and mock kings, urging restraint where the people craved release. Celebrate the Lord, not the tavern, they preached, but the crowds, warmed by wassail and firelight, kept their pagan spark alive. The church could rename the holiday, but it couldn't tame its heart. Saturnalia's spirit was too stubborn, its joy too infectious, slipping through the cracks of sermons to live in every carol, every candle, every cheeky demand for ale. Centuries later, Saturnalia's legacy lingers. Every chaotic family dinner, every gift unwrapped with a laugh, every wreath hung on a door owes a nod to Rome's wildest week. The modern holiday, with its mix of reverence and revelry, carries the DNA of a festival that dared to dream of equality and plenty. Christmas, for all its Christian glow, is a child of Saturnalia, a celebration that still whispers of a golden age when the world could pause and simply be joyful. As the festive echoes of Saturnalia fade, let's turn to a quieter figure, one whose work grounded the medieval world in life itself. The medieval midwife, steady and skilled, wove her own legacy, her hands bringing light to the season in a way no feast could match. In the medieval world, where life hung by a fragile thread, the midwife was a quiet hero, summoned in the dead of night when a mother's cries pierced the silence. She was no scholar with parchments or titles, but her hands held the weight of existence itself, guiding new souls into a harsh world. Villages and towns relied on her, from muddy hamlets to stone-walled manors, where childbirth was a dance between hope and peril. The midwife didn't just deliver babies. She was a beacon in the dark, her presence a steady hum amid the chaos of labor, her skill the difference between life and loss in a time when both were close companions. She had no formal training, no books to guide her. Her knowledge was forged in experience, passed down through whispers and watchful eyes. From her own mother, or an elder midwife, she learned the secrets of herbs, chamomile to soothe, fennel to ease pain, and the rhythms of a laboring body. She knew when to press a cool cloth to a forehead, or when to murmur prayers to calm a frightened mother. Her satchel was a treasure trove of practical magic, dried leaves, a knife honed sharp, and a thread to tie the cord. Every birth was a lesson, every cry a chapter in her unwritten book, her expertise carved into her hands by years of sweat and vigilance. Yet her work was shadowed by suspicion. In villages bound by superstition, midwives walked a tightrope. A healthy birth made her a savior. A loss could brand her a witch. Whispers followed her, tales of charms gone wrong or spirits angered by her touch. The church eyed her warily, its priests uneasy with her blend of herbcraft and prayer. Still, she pressed on, called to huts and halls alike, her presence a necessity no one could deny. She navigated these fears with a quiet strength, her calm voice cutting through panic, her hands steady even when hearts faltered. In the flicker of a single candle, she was both healer and guide, a figure of awe and unease. The midwife was an anchor, her work a tether to life in a world where death waited close. She knelt in straw or on cold stone, coaxing mothers through pain, her murmurs a lifeline. She was needed, feared, and rarely thanked enough, her name often forgotten, but her deeds etched in every child's first breath. Her role was the season's quiet counterpart, a reminder that amid the revelry of Christmas, life's deepest work continued in the shadows. As we honor her unsung labor, let's turn to the roots of her skill, the oral traditions that shaped the medieval midwife, passing wisdom through generations like a flame carried from one hearth to another. In the medieval world, where knowledge was a flame passed hand to hand, the midwife's craft was born not in classrooms, but in the raw, pulsing heart of the birthing room. A young girl, perhaps barely a woman herself, became an apprentice by shadowing an elder midwife, her eyes wide as she stepped into a world of sweat, blood, and miracles. She wasn't chosen for her learning, but for her steady hands and quiet courage, traits that bloomed under the watchful gaze of a woman who'd seen life's edges. The elder's voice, rough from years of late-night calls, guided her through the chaos, teaching her to read a mother's breathing, to feel the rhythm of labor like a song only they could hear. The learning was hands-on, messy, and real. The apprentice began small, fetching water, folding cloths, or stirring a pot of chamomile over a flickering fire. She stood at the edge of the birthing room, watching as the elder soothed a laboring woman, her hands moving with a certainty that seemed almost sacred. Slowly, the apprentice was drawn in, holding a mother's hand, pressing a cool rag to a fevered brow, or catching a newborn slippery with life. Each birth was a lesson, each cry a chapter. She learned to tie the cord, to check for breath, to whisper prayers when hope faltered. Mistakes were costly, but the elder's sharp corrections, "Not yet, girl, wait for the pulse," carved wisdom into her bones. The knowledge came not from books but from stories, passed like folklore around hearths or in hushed moments between births. "Don't cut the cord too soon," an elder would murmur, or rub sage on the belly for pain. These were the midwife's scriptures, oral traditions woven through generations, each tale a map of survival. Herbs, positions, the signs of trouble, all were memorized, repeated, and lived. The apprentice absorbed these like a sponge, her mind a tapestry of warnings and remedies. She learned which plants eased labor, which prayers calmed a village's fears, and how to face death with a steady gaze. This was no formal school, it was a lineage, a chain of women passing light through the dark. The apprentice's true test came with her first solo birth. No elder stood beside her now, only a laboring mother and a room thick with tension. Her hands trembled as she knelt, her heart racing, but the stories she'd learned steadied her. She murmured the old words, felt for the child's position, and guided it into the world. When the baby cried, sharp and alive, she exhaled, a midwife at last. That moment was her crown, her rite of passage, proof she could carry the craft forward. From those first trembling steps, the midwife built her toolkit, a collection of herbs, tools, and wisdom that would carry her through countless births, each one a testament to her resilience and skill. Let's explore that toolkit now, the practical magic that made her indispensable. In the dim glow of a medieval birthing room, the midwife's toolkit was a blend of earthy wisdom and quiet magic, her hands weaving life from the raw threads of nature and instinct. Her satchel, worn soft by years of midnight treks, held her arsenal, herbs, cloths, and tools as vital as her own heartbeat. Yarrow, its feathery leaves dried and crushed, was her shield against bleeding, sprinkled in bruise to steady a mother's strength. Mugwort, sharp-scented and steeped in warm water, eased the grinding pain of labor, its bitterness a small price for relief. These plants, plucked from fields or forest edges, were her medicine, their secrets learned through generations of trial and triumph, each dose a prayer to the earth itself. Her physical tools were simple but essential. Clean cloths, folded tight, soaked up blood, or swaddled a newborn's fragile warmth. Oils, olive or lavender, smoothed tense muscles, their slick touch a comfort in the chaos. A small sharp knife, its blade gleaming in the candlelight, cut the cord with a precision that marked the child's first breath. These weren't just objects. They were extensions of her will, as much a part of her craft as the song she hummed to calm a trembling mother. Every item was chosen with care, packed for a moment when life hung in the balance, her resourcefulness a light in the dark. Superstition wove through her work like a quiet thread. Charms, Perhaps a bead strung with fennel or a stone etched with a cross dangled from her wrist, a hedge against spirits the village swore roamed the night. She murmured prayers, half to God, half to older forces as she worked, her voice blending faith and folklore. A knotted cord might be tied above the bed to ease labor, or a sprig of rosemary tucked under a pillow for luck. These rituals weren't just habit. They were a balm for fear, a way to coax hope from a world where death was a frequent guest. The church might frown, but the midwife knew. A charm could steady a mother's heart as much as any herb. Above all, her intuition was her truest tool. No scrolls or scales guided her, just hands that felt a baby's position through a mother's skin, fingers that traced the pulse of life. She read groans like a map, knew when to push or pause, her touch a language older than words. In a time without machines, her instincts were her compass, honed by countless nights kneeling in straw or stone. She was both healer and seer, her craft a dance of practicality and mystery. As we honor her ingenuity, let's turn to the midwife's legacy, a quiet force that shaped the birthing room, her wisdom echoing through the lives she brought into the world. In the medieval world, where childbirth was a battlefield shadowed by death, the midwife stood as both warrior and guide, her hands steady against the tide of fear. Every birth was a gamble. Mothers and babes teetered on the edge of life, with fever, bleeding, or fate waiting to claim them. The midwife faced these dangers armed only with her satchel and her will, kneeling in straw or beside a noblewoman's bed, her voice a calm anchor in the storm of labor. She fought with rags to stem blood, prayers to soothe souls, and herbs to coax strength, and sometimes, against all odds, she won. Each cry of a newborn was her victory, a fragile triumph carved from a world where loss was never far. Her role was a tightrope walk between trust and suspicion. The church loomed large, its priests wary of her herb craft and whispered charms, which smelled too much of pagan ways. A failed birth could spark accusations of witchcraft, a shadow that followed her through villages. Yet in the birthing room, women trusted her completely. Mothers, sisters, and friends gathered around her, their faith in her hands absolute. She was their shield, their confidant, her presence a rebellion against a world that doubted women's strength. The church might judge, but in the candlelit chaos of birth, her word was law, her skill a light that no sermon could dim. The birthing room was her kingdom, a female sanctuary where men rarely tread. Here, the midwife ruled, her voice guiding mothers through pain, her hands weaving life from struggle. Women shared stories, fears, and laughter, their bond forged in the raw intimacy of creation. The midwife was their center, her knowledge a thread that tied them to generations past. She taught daughters to comfort mothers, aunts to brew teas, creating a circle of care that pulsed with resilience. In this space, hierarchy faded. Noblewoman or peasant, all were equal under her steady gaze, their shared vulnerability a quiet power. As centuries turned, her world began to shift. Male physicians, armed with books and new authority, encroached on her domain, dismissing her oral wisdom as superstition. Her role faded, her name often lost to history's pages. Yet, her legacy endured in every child who drew breath, every mother who survived the night. She was no queen with a crown, but her triumphs were no less grand. Her name may be forgotten, but every living soul she delivered was her monument, a testament to a courage that burned quietly but fiercely. Like the queens who defied courts and rewrote history, the midwife's heroism was a quieter fire, her legacy woven into the lives she saved. From Joanna's bold throne to Tamar's golden reign, these women shaped their worlds with audacity. The midwife, in her shadowed birthing rooms, did the same, her hands crafting life where chaos reigned. As we close this tale, we honor her, a silent force whose courage matched the mightiest crowns, her story a final spark in the glow of history's long night.